I'll start right away by sharing my screen here. For now, I'll just share this logo of Grist. And I wanted to make sure we give more people time to join, because some people might be joining a few minutes late. But I hate to waste your time, so I thought I could show you something fun and Grist related while we are waiting. And what I wanted to show you is this thing. I don't know if you know what it is, but my son the other day was interested in some secret messages. So I showed him how to use this Ceasar Cipher. It's called that because apparently Julius Caesar used it. And what it is you have an alphabet here in the circle from A to Z. And you have the same alphabet but shifted in the circle next to it. Oops. From A here to Z. And when you want to encode a message, you look up the letters in the outer circle and you write down the corresponding letter on the inner circle. So for example, to encode hello, you look up H and write down N, look up E and write down K, and so on. And then you reverse the process to decode it. Anyway, so he was really into it and started writing messages like that or decrypting my messages. And I thought, this is great, but I don't want to do the work. So I'm going to use Grist to encrypt my messages and decrypt them. And in fact, I don't know if you know, but computers were invented basically to decode messages. There is a movie about that part of history about Turing and the Enigma machine or code. The movie is called The Imitation Game. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty good. So anyway, so I made this Grist document. You put in your message here, and there is a formula that encrypts it. And if I put the message here, here's what the encryption is. And if I put, and this is the decryption part, if I put a message here, it will decrypt it over here. And if you want to see how it's done, I did it using this pretty sophisticated Python formula. It's a big formula and confusing, I think, if you are a spreadsheet user, but if you're a Python developer, it's a pretty small Python program. So in fact, if you're learning Python, this might be a fun kind of challenge to write one on your own or to go over this one. And if you're interested, I could, after the webinar, when it's time for questions, if you want, I can talk about it and show what it's actually doing. But it has a lot of Python ideas, like you can have multi-line formula, and you have imports and variables and a function defined inside and a list comprehension. So it's a bunch of ideas in this little encryption formula. Anyway, so this is the Ceasar Cipher. And I think maybe now is a good time to begin. Let's see. Nice. Do we have enough people to begin?
Yeah, I think we can start.
Yeah. So, oops. Let's start. So what I wanted to talk about in this first session, this is the first ever Grist webinar that we are doing, educational webinar. My goal here is twofold. One is educational. Hopefully all of you leave at the end by feeling more empowered to do more with Grist. And the other part is to answer your questions. So I'll start with the educational part, where I wanted to talk about what's, in my mind, the most fundamental difference between Grist and traditional spreadsheet, and that is that Grist is based on a database, on a relational database. And if you have experience with databases, with MS Access or Airtable, which is also database-like, or FileMaker, then you'll see some similarities here. So I'll talk about organizing data and how that's different between a database and a spreadsheet. And I'll start with this little example, which I made up for this webinar. This is an example business, which is a doggy daycare in Brooklyn. And if in New York City, there's a lot of people have dogs, even though a lot of people live in small apartments and work too much. And so there is this kind of, it actually exists here and somewhat popular maybe, where you can bring your dog to a daycare and your dog can have company during the day when you're working too much somewhere else. So we are imagining that we are running this business and we need to keep track of some data. We need to know who are our customers, who are the dogs and their owners and how old they are, and some information about the dog and contact information for the owner, like phone and email, and maybe they have some kind of plan that they're subscribed to. And another thing we need to know is the vaccinations for the dogs, because the state has some requirements that the dogs needs to have certain shots. Some of them are required, some of them are optional. The star ones are required. So we need we're using a spreadsheet here because we need to keep track of this info. This is the date would be in these columns, kind of till when the shot lasts. Like maybe if it has to be every year, then you get a shot and you put the date that's a year away when you need a new one. So that's the data. In fact, in our business, in this example, we imagined that the business has expanded and it's no longer only in Brooklyn. We have another one in Queens. So I copied the spreadsheet. There is now new data here, but essentially the same structure. Everything is about the same. I had like one extra column here for a promotion for a grand opening. Some customers are getting a discount, but otherwise everything is the same. And so that's our setup. And here, so I want to talk about Grist now. And before I do, I'd like to talk about what's good and what's bad about what we have so far. So what's good is that it's simple. Simple spreadsheet. When a new customer comes in, I put my cursor in a new row. I type in all the information that I need from them. They show me their vaccine information. I type it in. That's it. I'm done. So it's a very, very simple structure. And that's the benefit. As far as downsides, there are some downsides here. Let's talk about those. Some owners have 2 dogs. So some information for the owner gets duplicated. Most of the time, that's fine. It doesn't change very often. Here, when it's next to each other, it's easier. Here, I think I have an owner who's not next, who has, her second dog, Bloom and Petal, came at different times, so they're not next to each other. So if she changes her email address or something, I might not realize that I need to change it in 2 places rather than 1, and then it'll be I'll have a discrepancy. I won't know which one is right. So that's a potential problem. Another downside is that over time we might want to keep track of more data. Maybe there's a grooming service. So when I have maybe record some issues that a dog had on a certain date. So I could add some columns here to keep track of more data for each dog, but then I have to remember to also add those columns here. And so I'm duplicating some of that work. Another issue is, let's say somebody moved. So one of my customers, let's say, moved from Brooklyn to Queens, and loyal customers, so they're going to continue to go to our Queens location. So I can basically copy and paste a few rows from here and copy them into here, and I will think that I am done. But it's pretty easy to mess things up now because of this extra column that I had for promotion. This kind of copy pasting now messed up all of my vaccinations. They're now in the wrong place. So as long as you're careful, you can work around these problems. And as long as your data isn't too big, and as long as the people who are working on these documents are pretty competent and careful about it. But as you grow, you might have some junior staff who will mess things up by accident. And so basically, as the data grows and as you have more people working on it, more problems will arise of this kind. And it'll become really unmanageable if you have many more locations. If you imagine having 20 locations, just having spreadsheets for it all will become a disaster, because now every time you want to change anything about it, you would do it 20 times. And some of those times you will make a mistake somewhere, or somebody will make a mistake. So before that point, most businesses will invest into some kind of customized software to keep track of all this data. And so that's where Grist comes in. And I want to talk basically about how Grist can address some of these issues, but still be very kind of easy and simple to start with. But where as your business grows, you don't have to move away from it because it does work like custom software. And so the principle I want to introduce is something called dry principle. It's familiar to developers and database designers. And I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but if you have, it's an abbreviation. The dry principle, DRY, is an abbreviation. If you know what it is, you can put it into chat. Does anybody know? So let me put this here. The dry principle stands for don't repeat yourself. And the idea is to avoid duplication, avoid duplicating data or logic or structure of your document. And if you look up on Wikipedia, there's an article about the dry principle, and you know that every piece of knowledge should have a single unambiguous authoritative place where it lives in a system. And the reason for it is basically if you do duplicate, if something is duplicated, then those two pieces of information could get out of sync. And when they're out of sync, then you don't know which one is right. And that causes problems. And so this dry principle is what I will return to. I'll repeat it a few times. I'm not going to be dry when talking about it because I think it's really important. Anyway, so let's try to get some of this data into Grist. Here's my Grist workspace. Actually, you'll see I have some documents called Doggy Daycare here because I did some practice runs with this data. But here I'll start from scratch and I'll import from Google Drive. I'll select one of my documents. Import, and here it is, all the same dogs. I have the column names here imported, all the vaccination info, everything is here. For my second data set, the dogs in Brooklyn, I could have the same kind of structure as I did with my two spreadsheets. I could have a second table of dogs in Brooklyn, and it could have the same columns and just have the dogs in Brooklyn. But that would not be dry because the structure of what is a dog, that type of record would be repeated. I'd have one kind of dog, a Queen's dog, and a separate kind of table for Brooklyn dogs. A better way to do it would be a single table for both Queen's dogs and Brooklyn dogs. And I can do that pretty easily. All I'm missing is to know which location the dog belongs to. And you can add one by just adding a column for location. So that's what I'll do. And these are all the Queen's dogs, so they will have the location of Queens. When I import the Brooklyn dogs, they will have the location of Brooklyn. I can fill it in with a Command D shortcut, which is an Excel kind of shortcut that fills in a range with the top cell. So great, now I have my dogs, my Queen's dogs, they're marked as Queens. Now when I import my Brooklyn customers, I could import them into the same table. Whenever you import data, you get an option to decide where to import it to. I'm going to import it into this existing table. And we actually have some new features in Grist for imports. This update existing records is a new feature if you want to merge with existing data. But in this case, I'm actually adding new records, not merging. So I'm just going to click import. And now the data got filled in. Everything looks right. This promotion column, which was missing in Brooklyn, is not here. The vaccinations columns got matched by the name of the column, so everything is in the right places. The only thing that's missing here is the location. I know that all the empty ones are the ones from Brooklyn, so I will fill that in the same way. And now all my data from my two spreadsheets is now in one place. And so that's much drier than what we had before. So another area where this data is not dry is that the owners repeat. For example, here I have the same owner, repeats several times because he has a few different dogs. So this is where I recommend, pretend to be an application developer when designing these documents. Try to understand what kind of objects your data is made of. And if you think about your customers, you have a person coming in, you ask them for their name and contact info, and that's your dog owner. And then they might have one dog and they have several dogs. So for each person, there might be one or more dogs. So that's your clue kind of that the record for a person is a separate kind of thing than the record for an owner. And it makes sense to have a separate table for each one. So this is the structure that I want to move to. I'd like a table with owners where each owner is listed only once and never duplicated. And another table with dogs where each dog will have a reference to an owner. So multiple dogs have the same owner, but the owner info will not be duplicated. And so to do that, so this table will just have dogs. In fact, let me rename it to dogs rather than dogs queens. And I will add a new table and call it owners. And let's figure out which of these columns are related to the owner. So we have an owner name, which I can move over here to be next to the owner contact info, the phone and email. I think that's everything. And there are some ways, more than one way to do it, but I will just, here we'll use a simple way of copy pasting. So I'll just copy all these owners, paste them over here, name these columns. And that will be my table of owners. And this is a table where I do not want duplicates. I want this data to be dry. So to remove duplicates, you could use a formula to detect them. But in this case, it's going to be simpler, I think, if I just sort, and then I can go through and use a keyboard shortcut for deleting rows. I can see easily which ones are duplicates. So I'll just delete all the duplicates so that my data has unique owners only. So that's my owners. Now as I get back to dogs, the owner name column is a good identifier for the owner, but it's not a reference yet, it's just a name. And so to make the data relational, I am going to convert this column of names to a column of references. And you can do that by changing the type of the column to reference. Now let me talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. When converting to a reference, you will see that it suggests here to which table to take the data from. It's a reference to data from table owners, and it's going to show the column name. Now, if you basically Grist is guessing what we mean because we only have one other table and it has matching values. If you have many tables with matching values, Grist might be wrong. So make sure you take a look at this and see what you actually mean. But here we do want to have a reference to owners, so apply. This little icon indicates that it is a reference. One thing I want to point out for references is that a reference like this is a reference to the entire record of the owner. It's showing the name of the owner because of this show column says name, but I could actually choose it to show the phone instead or the email. This is just so we get to decide what to show, but the reference is to the entire column. So in fact, it's regardless of what we show, it makes sense to just call it the owner. Think of it as like the record for the owner. And now that we have that reference, we do not want these columns for phone and email because their authoritative place for that data is this table over here. And the data becomes accessible via the reference, and we don't want to have a duplicate of it. We can bring that data with a formula if we need to see it here, and if we'd like to see it in this grid, but it should be determined by the reference. And so that's it. I think we now made our data much drier. Now there's no duplication over here. We've made it relational. But now we need to make convenient views. What we started with was convenient because my Brooklyn stuff could work in the on this spreadsheet, my Queen stuff could work on this spreadsheet. We want to keep it convenient when using Grist. And so I'll create a page to make it more convenient. And I'll add a page. Actually, escape from here. I want a page that allows me to choose between select the location, Queens or Brooklyn. And a way you can do it is by adding a page and summarizing dogs. So this icon is an icon to tell you to summarize data, tell Grist to summarize data. In this case, I want to summarize group this table by location. So now when I add a page, I will see that I see the dogs by location. There are 11 in Queens and 13 in Brooklyn. It just counts things up automatically. And now that I have these two locations, I can add a page, but I want to add a widget to page. I want to add a list of dogs, a table of dogs. And I want it to show just the dogs for the selected location. So this you can do using this select by dropdown. And when you add it to page, you'll see that whenever you select a location, you'll see dogs in that location. In fact, I can rearrange it. I have a few locations. I can make this small and this bigger. And now my data looks more like that spreadsheet, but it's drier. It's the same structure for each location. In fact, at 20 locations, it would be the same structure then as well. And when I resize this column, for example, it's resized for both locations. So let me see. So this is pretty good so far. And as far as kind of making this data easy to work with, again, you can think, put yourself in the shoes of an application designer or like an application user. You can think about what would be perfect for your business. And for me, it seems, having to scroll this back and forth, it's nice that I can see all the data at a glance. But usually, when somebody calls or comes in, I just need to see their data. So it actually makes more sense for me to be able to find somebody easily, but then to see a card for them, like the details just for that dog or just for that owner. So let me do that. Firstly, let me move this page over here. I can rename it to, I don't know, dog's dashboard or something. And I can add a widget to the page. And you can say for the selected dog, I want to see a card view. And for which dog is the one from the table of dogs. So I want to see a card view for that. So there it is. As I select a dog, I can see all the information for a dog here. I don't have to scroll horizontally and accidentally look at the wrong row. It's all here. And I can add another card for the owner. And I remember that reference column we had was a reference to the entire record. And so I can select by dog's owner. That's the owner reference column from the dogs table. And whenever you have multiple things on the screen, you can rearrange them using these three dots over here and just dragging them. And if you drag different areas of the screen, you might find good spots to drop something into. So I will do it this way. I also have to manage my Zoom windows while talking about it. Put it over here. Let's put this one over here. Because now I can resize things together and give it more or less space. A card can be customized. For example, I could choose a different theme for it. I could rearrange the layout if I want. I'm happy with this one. Same for a dog's card. I could, for example, maybe here, I know which dog I'm looking at. I have the owner already. Maybe if there are some fields I don't need to see here, I don't need to see the owner. the location, but the rest maybe I do want to see, so I'll leave it like this. And another thing here, here I still have this like wide spreadsheet, but actually all I want is, I just want to be able to find somebody quickly when they come in or call. So I just want to see the puppy name. And I think I don't have the right people selected. Actually, I want to select this table. And in this table, I want to, except for puppy name and owner, I want to hide everything else. So that's going to be my structure. And so this is going to be this, this new view that I created where I get to select the location I'm working in. I get to select the dog, the row with the dog, and I will see all the owner details, all the dog details, and that's going to be my my view. And back to mention kind of why the dry principle matters here is that I only created this view once. No matter how many locations I have, I don't have to like duplicate that work, and I don't have to worry about things getting out of sync. The owner also is only in one place. If somebody updates their email address, so maybe there's a .com at the end, it got updated right here in this owner's table. See, I had a .com at the end. So whether I'm looking at this dog or this dog, it's the same owner record. And I'm never have to worry about things getting out of sync because there's only one record for the owner. So that's a big progress kind of from being a flat spreadsheet, and it's very usable, and it's more convenient probably for most cases. If I want a spreadsheet view, I still have it here for owners and here for dogs. And the spreadsheet view is maybe more convenient if I am trying to add some more columns or figure out kind of how to work with my data. So in fact, I wanted to show one more thing here, which is one of the difficulties of this business. I have to keep track of vaccinations. And so I wanted to add a column that would show me when the vaccines are up to date. And so these columns would, in the spreadsheet, they had an asterisk here. In my Grist document, these two columns, the asterisk was replaced with an underscore just during the import, but I could fix that back over here or just over here. I could just click on it again and replace it. So the asterisk is kind of the indication that it should be a required column, required shot, I should say. And here I want to add a formula to see if all the vaccines are up to date. And here's how I can add this formula. I could say, basically, if this column, this is the expiration date for this vaccine. If it's greater than today, then it's okay. And this column also needs to be greater than today. And if both of them are true, that returns true. And if at least one of them isn't true, that it'll be false. I can change this column to be of type toggle. And I could use like one of these other widgets like a switch. And that's my easy way to tell if the vaccines are okay. In fact, in my dog's dashboard, maybe this column should be showing up here, because when somebody comes in, let's say like if Benjamin brings Mariah, I could say like, oh wait, your vaccines are not okay. Or they have new documentation, I have this information right here, and they say, well, it expired a few days ago, maybe that is okay. Or maybe they have new info and I can update it right here. And so that's how you could have a formula for to check vaccines. If you are interested, I could talk more about this kind of formula. For example, one issue you might run into if you have a missing date, then a formula like this will have a type error because I just tried to compare a blank with today, and it says you can't compare a date to none. Type is the type of a blank cell, and that's easy to fix. We can there's a couple of ways to fix it. Actually, let me leave it for your questions, because that's one of the things I can talk about more. Feel free to ask about that. Another thing we could do is, we might be trying to keep track of vaccines. Maybe we are getting audited by the state or something occasional. We need actually the records of these vaccines. So when people come in and they need to show us their card, and we need to keep a scan of it. So we can show you how you could add an attachment column where you can insert those attachments, like photo of their shot record or something like that. But the only thing I wanted to reiterate before opening up to your questions is the dry principle again. In Grist, this formula we added, it's a formula you type in once. You can type in any of these cells, but it applies to every row in the table. And that's one of the ideas of Grist. You don't ever have to worry about your formulas being out of sync or not applying to every row. It's always going to be in every row. It applies to every dog, regardless of location. So I never had to worry about copy pasting the formulas between 2 different views or between 20 different rows. It's all already there because of the dry structure of the document. And so I think that's it. That's all. That's what I wanted to show. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and Anais will tell me what to in what order to go. And then we also had some questions that you asked when you signed up for the webinar, and we can answer some of those as well. So go ahead and start with your questions.
Eric is asking, is there backup data stored on Grist?
Yes, there is. So let me actually show you where you will find backups. So there are automatic backups in document history. Document history, so this is the tool for it. There are 2 tabs here. Activity is kind of like the less useful one, but it shows the recent activity on the document. But snapshots are kind of made automatically. Basically, anytime you make an edit to a document within a few seconds or minutes of that, Grist makes a snapshot of it, and it maintains a history of them. Snapshots longer in time get pruned out, so you will not have like a snapshot for every second, but kind of going back some days you'll have a snapshot maybe every day, and then you'll have a snapshot every week as you go for more than a week. But those are your automatic snapshots. You can open any of them to see it, and you can even compare it to the current. We can see maybe what changed since this 5 minutes ago. I think maybe was I just talking during those 5 minutes? So there's nothing that changed. Compared to current, am I comparing to current? Oh, I guess nothing changed here. It doesn't. So this the comparison feature is beta. So I think there are no differences in columns that are showing right now, but if there were differences in rows, you would have seen them as like red and green. That's actually a really handy feature if you're changing data when to see what changed. And then when you are looking at a snapshot like this, you have a couple of options here. Well, you can just return to the current version. You can save a snapshot. You can save that older version as its own document, but you can also replace the current version. Like, I guess that might be useful if you really mess something up and you want to revert to a previous version. You can say replace current version, and it'll tell you, well, you've modified your document since then. Are you sure you want to lose those changes and replace with an older version? You can agree to that or not. I will just click back to current. So this is the automatic snapshots feature. Besides that, you can always kind of make your own copy. You can duplicate the document maybe, and just say this is my doggy daycare. This is my snapshot from 2/21/18. And that's how you could make just a copy for your records. And maybe an even better way, if you're worried about safety of your business data, is to download it. When you download a document, you get a file with a .grist extension, and that file can be imported back when you click import document, and the entire file will be back to normal, but you can save that file in some other cloud or in your desktop or in a backup disk or something. And in fact, that file can also be opened by other tools. It's in a format called SQLite. And that's a format that's standard, and many tools understand it.
Okay, we have a question from Ron asking, how does Grist handle multi-line Python code? Can it all fit in one cell?
Yes. Let's go to our multi-line. Oh, this is not a multi-line Python formula. It's a single line. You can use Shift-Enter to add new lines. And you can add as many as you want. And in Python code, you can also use comments with starting with a pound sign. Comments are basically notes in the code that are meant for humans to read. I forget if Excel allows it, but it's sometimes it's really good to have comments, because it will remind not only others but yourself when you're looking at it like a month later or 3 years later, why you wrote something. And so, well, I just used it to show you that you can have multiple lines. So for an example of this formula, actually, let me change this formula a bit. I wanted to show how you could use a slightly different approach to showing whether a vaccine is up to date or not. You can say if this vaccine expires after today and this vaccine expires after today, then you can return. One thing that's pretty cool is you can use emoji these days pretty easily. You can return this emoji, check mark, and then you say else. That's in every other case. You can return a different emoji. So we can put in like a red X. And emojis, some of them are colorful, so it actually kind of makes it easy to see things. And the reason my column is showing up pink is because it was still marked as toggle, but I can make it text. Center it, and now look, my vaccination status is much more easily visible. And the formula can be edited right here, but it can also be edited here in the side panel. And that's just a little example of a multi-line formula.
Okay, we have a follow-up question from Ron on this and another from Howard, but Ron would like to know, can we import libraries so we can call their functions?
You can import any standard library in Python. Yes, you can. You can import, what would be an interesting one? Actually, let me go back to this Ceasar Cipher, because I am using an import here. You can import, here I'm importing the string function library, because it has this like list of all the English alphabet, basically as a already existing variable. So that's how I'm using it here. In this example, I'm also defining a function just so I can call it in a loop to do my decryption. But this is just for the sake of an example of importing things. It's right here. Let me also answer a question that you might also have, which is whether you can import third-party libraries. And the answer to that is, for now, you cannot. Only standard libraries, standard Python libraries are available. But that might change over time. This is being able to import third-party libraries is something we would like to add functionality for.
Okay, and then we have a question from Howard. Can you discuss how to format time without a date, such as hours, :minutes, and can these be added?
Hello, Howard. Yes, I remember dealing with this. There are some ways to do it. So let me think of a good example here. A doggy daycare might be a perfect time if we had like a time if we were to add some example here for like scheduling a dog and what time it comes in and leaves, how much time it spends, maybe that determines our pricing or something. But in this example, I don't want to make it too complicated. So let me start a new document here. The question is about time of day as opposed to date or a date time. So let me start by saying that there are two types of columns that are available in Grist already. One is a date column that we already saw. A date time column represents a point in time, like a specific point in time. You can fill it in with a command semicolon shortcut, and it shows, this is a date and a time, and it also has a time zone. So in fact, this is a particular point, like right now, if I change the time zone to, let's say, I don't know, London, then it will represent the time differently, but it's still the same moment in time. It might be useful to include the time zone so that it's unambiguous what it means. When you want to represent time in something, for example, 10:30 a.m. or 2:30 p.m. One of the things you might want to do is to be able to do calculations on these columns, on these dates. Like, for example, take how much time was spent between this time and this time. The easiest way to do it, I would say, is to actually turn the standalone time into a full time, because for full time, like point in time, all of that kind of is available. You can just subtract them and get the number of the interval in between them. To get deeper into it, I think it may be worth either a separate webinar, or better yet, I should point to some good examples that are already out there. I think we have something we might have some in the community forum. I think I have something. Yeah, there's a template. This one. Where for any, where you can basically record the start time and an end time, and there is automatically calculated duration in minutes or hours, and you can use that duration to calculate maybe some charge. Beyond that, I think it's best to talk about in the community forum, because it's not a simple thing to convert from just time like this to parse this to do more calculations in it. So I think I should stop here so we have time for other questions.
Okay, we have a question from Enrique. Can we have different choices for a column depending on what is selected in another column's choices?
I see. So the question is about choices. Let's make an example out of this. This promotion could be a choice, for example. You could have like grand opening could be one promotion. Maybe I have I don't know, 2 dogs for one promotion. I'm totally making it up. For these choice, I mean, the choice column is very handy. One of the things that's really useful about it is you can like have a color in it, because then things become much more visual. And what you might want is, like, even for this example, you might want to say, like, well, somebody in Brooklyn comes in and says, like, oh, I got the grand opening promotion, but actually it's not available in Brooklyn. So the way I understand the question, at least, is like, can you make this drop down where you get to select the promotion? Can you make it depend on other things in the row? And trying to see if there is a good workaround. I think the short answer is no. You can't. It doesn't depend on what else is in the row. But the reason I'm thinking about this is I know that in some cases you can have a little you can kind of help yourself by having perhaps rather than for a choice column, if you had a reference column, you could have an extra table of promotions. So one record in the table would be the grand opening promotion, another record would be the 2 dogs for 1 promotion. And you can have maybe 100 records there, but you don't have, but you can have an extra column that for some of those records returns the name of the promotion, and for other records returns blank. And if you use that column for the dropdown, then those records that are blank would not be shown. Not sure if it exactly answers the question, but it's basically a way for a reference column, which as far as a dropdown, they work very similarly to a choice column. I guess we have a reference column here. Like if I'm adding a new dog, for example, let's say I have a new dog called Funny. And here the reference column has a similar kind of dropdown. And so here there is some more control about what gets shown here. But still, I don't think it would depend on what's in the current row. I think that is a feature that's been brought up a couple of times. So feel free to request it officially in the community forum, and we might be able to add that. But right now it's not available.
Okay, we have a question from Kevin. Suppose you want to keep a history of vaccine dates instead of deleting and entering in new ones. How do you tell Grist to check the latest vaccine date in record? So for example, similar thing can happen with inventory prices where product prices change, but you want to multiply the price times the quantity using the most recent price.
That's a very good question. Actually, let me open now another example here somewhere out here in Grist templates. Somewhere we have a template of payroll. And so this template answers your question basically. There is a table of rates where for a single person, it has actually 2 dimensions because a single person could have a job in different roles in this example, but more importantly, they can have different rate at different times. So as they have pay raise, the hourly rate changes. But for this example, we want to make sure that between 2019 and 2020 April, this rate is used of 1650, and starting with April, this rate is used, and starting with August, this higher rate is used. And so that's very similar, I think, to your question. In fact, it's a bit more involved because you don't always want to pick the latest rate. Here, sometimes based on like which date of the payroll, you want to use the appropriate rate so that historical data is still correct. And the formula here uses, I think, kind of a fancy formula to figure out the rate. And because it is a more complicated example, this is a more complicated formula. But because it is a template, it's well commented, so you can read it to understand what it's doing. And so first thing you do is you look up all the records that apply, right? So in this case, for the person for the given role, and you might have several rates for several different dates. Then we want to pick out only those rates that are that started before the current row's date. That's kind of the extra complexity. I'm not only care about the latest one, but I need to go relative to the date in the current row. So I can filter things out. So these are the past rates. This is called the list comprehension, where I go through every record in this list of rates. And I only include it if that rate start is before the current date. And this is the part that's most relevant to you. I take this list and I take the maximum record. This is a list of records, and looking at the maximum record from this list, where the key, what does it mean to be maximum? What am I comparing? The key is a function that returns the start of the rate. So this is kind of a Python syntax for finding maximum by the rate start of each record. And so that finds basically the applicable record. And once I have that record, I can take any field from it. And the field I want here is the current rate, that hourly rate. So this is the example that I would refer you to. And in your case, it could be simple. It's basically skip like one of these steps. And this formula is the most relevant one to pick the latest one out of a list of records by a particular field.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
I remember a question in the sign up. There was a question about filtering by one of several fields. And for filtering by one of several, so well, you might know that there's a, I could filter, for example, here. I could filter for everybody who doesn't have the lime shot, and I can filter also by everybody who doesn't have this canine flu shot. And I'm only seeing records that are blank here and here. But what if I want to only see records that are blank here or here? How do you do that? So I can, this cross will revert my filters. The way to do that is to use a formula. And so you can add a column and you can say, missing Lyme or flu, or whatever is the name for the column. And here you can say, if not this or not this, then you can return true. And in other cases, return false. And I have the true and false, and this can be a toggle as well. But now by this column, it's easy to filter data and you can see, okay, I want to say all the records where it returned true. This is where one of them is missing. So these are all the records where this one is missing or this one is missing. So that's how you could filter by or. You need to create the helper column using a formula. We don't have other questions live. I have one other question that somebody asked during sign up, which is how to do the lookup formula. Should I talk about that?
Yep.
Okay. So lookup formula is it's commonly needed in spreadsheets. So whenever you have kind of like data in multiple tables spreadsheet that needs to be related, you need to use VLOOKUPs in Excel, for example. In Grist, you can see how we use the reference column instead. And actually in this document, there are no lookup formulas at all. But sometimes it is useful. So, and for example, let's say if instead of an owner column, I'm actually going to copy here. I'm going to pretend that we need a lookup formula. Let's say we have, owner name again. I'll just put in the text. So here I have the name. So this is not a reference. This is just the text. And I pretend this reference doesn't exist. So I'll just hide it here. But somehow I have a list of names here. I have the list of names here. And I want to look up the record that corresponds to the name. What we did when setting up this document is I converted this column over here from text to reference. But another thing we could do is we could add another column. I'll just call it lookup for the sake of this example. And in this column, I want to look up the record in owners that corresponds to this name. And the way you would do it is you will start typing a formula by typing an equal sign. You'll type in owners, autocomplete, that's the name of the table that we are doing the lookup in. The function is lookup one or lookup records. So the difference is lookup records might return multiple records. And like in the example with the rates, we needed to find all the records so we can then find the latest of those several. Lookup one just returns one record. In this case, the owners are unique. We only want one record, so we'll use lookup one. And now, this is a function call, and inside this function call, we need to put in some arguments. And the argument form is you put in the name of the column that you're looking up, and it's called name here. I'll just save it so I could go over here and remember that this column is called name. And then you put equal sign and say, what is the value that you're looking up? And the value I'm looking up is this field. So let's look more closely at this formula. This syntax with the $sign, it is a value from the current record, the value of owner name from the current record. So in this case, it'll be Paula. In the next row, it'll be Esteban, and so on. The rest of the formula, owners is the name of the table. Name is the name of the column from the owners table. So those are both written without the $sign. When this formula works, it's returning you, if you recall, a reference. And if you recall, a reference is a reference to the entire record. So by default, it's represented as an owners, and in the bracket, it has this unique identifier of the record. Unique identifier of the record, by the way, is not necessarily the row number, because the row number really, it depends on the sorting and so on. The number of the record is a value that doesn't change. If we change this column to actual type reference, then we get, it's a reference to owners, that's correct, but we can choose which column to show. So we could show a phone, we could show a name. And this is how you could use a lookup. Basically, that's another way we could have converted from an owner name to a proper reference to that record. So I just wanted to show that as an example of using a lookup.
Could you also real quickly show, in case someone hasn't discovered it yet, on the reference column that we had, how to do a simple lookup using that reference column? So not using the lookup one formula, but just simply writing reference column dot and the field. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me unhide our hidden column here. Put it back to where it was. If you have a reference column like this, you might wonder, but how do I actually show the email address of this person? I want to see the email address right here. And there are two easy ways. I'll say it that way. One is if you put your cursor on this column and you look in the side panel, this creator panel, if you scroll down just for reference columns, there is this extra option, which is add referenced columns. Because this is a reference to a whole record, you can actually add a column easily for any of the fields in that record. So an owner has a name, phone, and email. I want to see email, I just click this. And it just added me a column with the email. It called it owner_email. And what it is, it's a formula column. And you can see what the formula is. It's a very, very simple formula. $owner, that refers to this cell here. And because it's a reference to a record, you can use dot notation and then any of the fields from that referenced record. So I could have written this formula myself rather than use that drop down. And you can use a formula like that in other fields, more complicated calculations. Basically, it's to show that if you have a reference like this $owner, then all the fields from that record are very easily available, and you don't need a lookup to get to those fields.
Well, we're coming up in the hour. Enrique has a question about charts, but I think that'll take up more than a few minutes. Yeah. So
Deloitte, I see a question about charts. Yeah. I see another question about the time tracking template. The time tracking template we will publish soon. It's in drafts right now. And for charts, I think we will maybe talk about it in another webinar because we are done with the hour.
Yeah, I was going to say, Enrique, if you could ask more specific questions about charts in the forum, that'll help us. We can respond to you quicker there, and then we'll set up another webinar and maybe do like a drill down on charts.
Charts is an area of active work. If you're using charts a lot, you might be noticing that the UI for configuring them is improving little by little, and more chart types will show up. So look out for that. All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Anais. I hope you do feel empowered to do more with Grist now. And I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.